Welcome back. If you're new here, I'm glad you found us. This is Hidden Badges Stories, and what we do here is simple. We tell the stories that never made the news. The ones that happened in hospital hallways and exam rooms. The ones where the person who changed everything was wearing a name tag, not a medal. Before we start tonight, do me one thing. Tap that like button. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button now. Because what I'm about to tell you is the kind of story you'll want to send to someone the moment it's over. Let's go. For 17 years, Major General Boyd Lennox sat in a wheelchair and told his children to stop hoping. He had said it so many times that it no longer sounded like giving up. It sounded like fact, like the tide coming in. Like the kind of truth a man accepts when he has spent long enough watching the world's best doctors open his file, read 3 pages, and close it again with the same expression. The expression of people who already know the ending before they sit down. Boyd Lennox had commanded 8,000 soldiers across 3 combat deployments. He had held the line in places that did not appear on public maps. He had made decisions, in rooms with no windows, that he would carry to his grave. He had done all of that standing up on his own 2 feet, with the weight of those decisions pressing down on his spine like a second skeleton. The spine gave out in the winter of 2008. Not from a bullet, not from a bomb. From something quieter and more patient than either. A progressive neuromuscular degeneration that 3 Army neurologists, 2 civilian specialists at Johns Hopkins, and 1 specialist in Zurich had all traced to long-term exposure to a classified burn compound used in certain field operations between 2005 and 2007. None of them could name the compound publicly. None of them could offer a treatment. All of them had used variations of the same phrase. Irreversible. By 2012, Boyd could not stand. By 2014, he could not feel his legs at all. By 2025, he had stopped attending his own medical appointments unless his daughter Laurel scheduled them and drove him there herself. Laurel Lennox was 34 years old. She taught high school history in San Antonio. She had quietly rearranged the entire architecture of her adult life to be within 20 minutes of her father at all times. She had found the referral herself, waited 5 months for it, and had not told Boyd until the night before. Because she had learned, over 17 years, that the longer he had to think about an appointment, the better his reasons for canceling it became. Carter, her younger brother, 26, home from graduate school in Austin for the week, pushed the wheelchair through the sliding glass doors of Meridian Medical Center's neurology wing on a Tuesday morning in March. Carter had his father's jaw and his father's habit of going quiet when the situation called for it. He pushed the chair and said very little and watched everything. The waiting room was full. At 9:15, a nurse appeared at the doorway. She was not tall, not striking in any way a stranger would have paused to notice. Brown hair pulled back tight, a few strands loose at her temple, scrubs the color of a clear sky in late summer. Vivid blue, the kind that stood out in a crowded room without trying to. A small pin above her name tag. A narrow compass rose, old and worn, pressed flat so many times the edges had gone smooth. A thin scar along her right forearm, barely visible unless the light caught it at the right angle, 5'7", or so. Her name tag read M. Lane, RN. She moved through the waiting room the way certain people move through unfamiliar terrain, measuring it without appearing to, noting sight lines and exits without looking directly at them. Nobody noticed. That was the point. Margot Lane had been a floor nurse at Meridian Medical Center for 6 years. Before that, she had been Warrant Officer 3rd Class Margaret Lane of the United States Army's Special Operations Combat Medicine Research Group, attached to Fort Detrick, Maryland. Clearance level she did not discuss. Program designation she had signed an agreement never to speak of publicly. Her call sign had been Slate. She had not used it in 7 years. She pushed open the waiting room door. Lennox family? Laurel stood. That's us. Margot led them to exam room 4. She took vitals without rushing. Blood pressure, pulse, oxygen. She worked with the practiced economy of someone who had done this 10,000 times and still treated it as though this one time was the only one that mattered. She wrapped the cuff around Boyd's left arm. She set it in place. She glanced down at his left wrist. She stopped. Not outwardly. Not in any way that Laurel or Carter or Boyd would have caught. But inside something that had been very still for a very long time shifted. The way a compass needle moves when it finally comes within range of true north. On the inside of his left wrist, just below the wrist crease, was a tattoo the size of a dime, old, faded to gray-blue, the shape of a lighthouse, abstract, more symbol than picture. The beam rendered as a single horizontal line through the middle of the tower. Margot had last seen that mark in a classified file photograph, in a locked room at Fort Detrick, in a program that was officially shuttered in October of 2012, and whose records had been archived under a classification level that did not appear in any public database. She completed the blood pressure reading. She wrote the number down. General Lennox. Her voice stayed level. The tattoo on your wrist, did a field medic put that there? Boyd looked at her for the first time since she'd entered the room. His eyes were dark and still, the eyes of a man who had spent a lifetime reading other people's faces faster than those people knew they were being read. 2008, he said, before the injury, a corpsman outside Kandahar, before the medevac came. Did he do anything else? To the back of your neck or your lower spine? Boyd was quiet for a moment. He did something to my neck. I asked him what it was. He said it was above my pay grade. A pause. I was a major general, so I knew he wasn't joking. Margot nodded. She wrote something on the chart. I'm going to bring you in to see Dr. Strauss now. I'll be back. She walked out. She kept her pace even until she reached the supply corridor at the end of the hall. Then she went to her locker. On the top shelf, behind a water bottle and a spare set of compression socks, was a small zipper pouch, black nylon, unmarked, the size of a large pencil case. She had put it there on her first day at Meridian 6 years ago, and she had not opened it since, not once. She had thought about it on bad days. She had thought about it when she passed wheelchairs in the hallway. She had thought about it and then walked away, because the program was gone and the files were sealed, and she had been told, in a room with no windows, that the recipient list was classified and she had no legal authority to contact any of them. She took the pouch from the shelf. She walked back to exam room 4. Dr. Bennett Strauss had been chief of neuromuscular medicine at Meridian Medical Center for 11 years. He had published 47 papers. He had trained 16 fellows. He had spoken at the last 4 consecutive meetings of the American Academy of Neurology. His silver hair was always parted with the same precision. His posture was the posture of a man who had been told, across decades and in enough different rooms, that he was the smartest person in any of them. He had started to believe it around year 3. He walked into exam room 4 at 9:38. He read the first page of the file and did not sit down. Mr. Lennox. Laurel's spine straightened. General Lennox. The injury is documented as a complete neuromuscular collapse at L2 through L4, with progressive degeneration confirmed across 17 annual imaging cycles. He flipped a page. There is no intervention pathway available for a case of this duration and severity. You have been given the same answer in multiple institutions because the medicine has not changed. What you are experiencing is permanent. He closed the file. I'm going to refer you to the VA palliative coordinator, Lane, discharge paperwork. He left without looking at the family. The room was quiet. Boyd Lennox looked at his hands. They were folded in his lap. They had in a different life been steady enough to thread a wire in total darkness. Now they lay there and did not move. Carter's hands had gone white on the wheelchair handles. Laurel stood very still at the window. She had driven her father to appointments like this for 17 years. She knew how to make her face do nothing. She had gotten very good at it. She was doing it now, and it was costing her something. Margot set the black pouch on the rolling tray. She crossed the room and crouched in front of the wheelchair, so that her face was level with Boyd's. General. Her voice was very quiet. I need your permission to do a brief assessment. 8 minutes. I'm not going to promise you anything. I haven't done this in 7 years. But I think the corpsman in Kandahar did something for you that nobody in 17 years has known how to look for. Boyd studied her face the way he had once studied terrain before moving his soldiers into it. He looked at the compass rose pin above her name tag. He looked at the scar on her forearm. He looked at her eyes, which were steady and green and entirely without performance. You have my permission, he said. The door opened behind them. Strauss came back in. He had a different expression now, not the flat certainty of before, but something more careful. He had spent 4 minutes at the nursing station and had apparently not found, or had found, something he hadn't expected. Lane, what is in the pouch? She unzipped it. Inside was a device that looked like nothing in particular. A metal cylinder, matte gray, roughly the diameter of a marker pen, 5 inches long, a small dial at one end, a flat contact plate at the other, old but intact. It's a frequency resonance calibrator, Margot said. It interfaces with a subdermal neural preservation node by transmitting a specific low-frequency signal through the skin. If the node is still functional, it reinitializes the preservation current at full operational amplitude. That device is not approved. It was approved under a classified research protocol in 2010. The protocol was declassified in 2019. The device is legal to possess. The procedure is within the scope of the published Lighthouse Research Addendum. Strauss's face had lost some color around the jaw. You are a floor nurse, Lane. I am a floor nurse with a valid RN license, documented military medical training, and this patient's informed consent. She looked at him steadily. You can call security. But if you do, you will spend the rest of your career knowing you stood in this room on the morning that changed everything for a man who gave 35 years to this country. And you chose to make a phone call. Strauss said nothing. Boyd spoke from the chair. His voice was quiet. It did not need to be loud. He had commanded troops from a flag bridge for 2 decades without a microphone, and some things did not leave a person. Doctor, let her work. Strauss stepped back. Margot asked Boyd to lean forward. Carter braced his father's weight against his own chest, and Boyd's back was exposed. The papery skin over old muscle, a surgery scar across the lower lumbar, the quiet geography of a body that had been still for too long. At the base of his neck, below the hairline, there was nothing visible, no mark, no scar. Margot pressed her left fingertips against the spot anyway. She had memorized the coordinates from 17 case files 7 years ago. She pressed gently at the precise location where a subdermal implant would rest in a 6'2" man with a 16-inch neck circumference. Boyd made a sound. Small. A short, involuntary intake of breath. The sound of a man who has not felt something in a very long time and is not certain, for 1/2 second, whether what he is feeling is real or the echo of a memory of feeling. General, Margot kept her voice even, what do you feel? Boyd's voice was controlled. Pressure. Left side of my neck, going down. How far? A long pause. Shoulder, he stopped. Something changed in his face. Left arm. Another pause, I feel my left arm. Laurel's hand went to her mouth. Carter pressed his forehead against the top of his father's head. He did not make a sound. His shoulders shook. Strauss had taken 2 steps forward without noticing he'd done it. He was standing at Margot's left shoulder, and his arms had fallen to his sides. Margot picked up the calibrator. She set the dial to 1. She placed the contact plate flat against Boyd's lower back at the L2 vertebra. She pressed the activation point. Boyd's right leg moved. Not a spasm, not the involuntary jerk of a reflex arc. A slow, deliberate, voluntary extension of the quadriceps, the muscle waking the way a person wakes from a deep sleep, confused and uncertain and absolutely, undeniably present. Boyd Lennox looked down at his own leg. No one in the room breathed. Then Laurel turned toward the window. She covered her face with both hands, and her shoulders went up and down in long, slow waves, and she did not try to stop any of it. Carter went to his knees beside the wheelchair. He had his father's hand pressed between both of his, and he was holding on the way people hold things they thought they'd lost forever. Boyd did not weep. But his jaw tightened and released, and his eyes were very bright, and one single line tracked down the side of his face and disappeared into his collar, and he did not lift his hand to wipe it. Margot set the calibrator down. She stood. She looked at Strauss. I need a full spinal MRI, cervical through lumbar, with a frequency amplification protocol from the 2019 Lighthouse Addendum. EMG of both lower extremities. A physical medicine consult, and this family needs a room in this hospital tonight. Strauss's mouth opened, closed. Dr. Strauss. She did not raise her voice. If I'm right, and I am right, this case will be in a journal before the end of the year. Your name can be on that paper, but right now I need those orders. Strauss looked at Carter on his knees on the floor. He looked at Boyd. He looked at Margot. He turned and walked to the nursing station. He started typing. The MRI confirmed everything. The neural preservation node was intact. The signal pathways at L2 through L4 were compressed and severely atrophied from 17 years of disuse, but they were not gone. The parallel preservation current had maintained the structural integrity of the axonal sheaths against every clinical prediction anyone in that building had ever made. Dr. Unipark, the hospital's senior neurologist, came down from the 3rd floor to look at the imaging herself, and stood in front of the screen for 4 full minutes without speaking. I've been reading these films for 16 years, she said finally. The signal is only visible when you amplify the correct frequency band, Margot said. It's documented in the Lighthouse Declassification Addendum, published as a footnote. A footnote. Yes. Park looked at the image for another long moment. Then she picked up her pen and started taking notes. That night, Margot sat in her car in the hospital parking lot and opened the worn notebook she kept in her bag. Not a phone, not an electronic file, a paper notebook, spiral-bound, because some habits from Fort Detrick did not leave cleanly. She opened it to a page near the back. 31 names, written in her own handwriting 7 years ago, the night before the program closed, because she hadn't been allowed to keep a copy, and she hadn't trusted herself to remember every single one. She had remembered every single one. She started making calls. 19 of the 31 were still alive and reachable. 5 had died of unrelated causes. 4 she couldn't locate despite trying. 3 had sustained too much secondary damage. Nodes degraded, muscle tissue gone past any threshold she could work with. She met with each of those 3 herself. She did not lie to them. She told them what the technology could and could not do. They thanked her anyway, which was the hardest part. But 19. 19 men and women who had a lighthouse on their wrist and a device dormant in their spine that nobody in the civilian medical system had known how to find. She called them one by one. She told each of them the same thing. She could not promise they would walk. She could promise them there was signal in their nerves that had been there the whole time, and that signal could be found again. And the road was long and hard, and she would walk it with them if they would let her. Every one of them said yes. 7 months later, Boyd Lennox walked to a podium in the Meridian Medical Center auditorium. He used a cane. He had used a walker for the first 12 weeks, a cane for the last 8. 3 times in the past 2 weeks he had walked from his bedroom to the kitchen without the cane, which he had told no one yet because he was saving it. He looked out at the room. In the first 2 rows sat 11 veterans, 7 men and 4 women, each in their service dress, some with canes, 2 unassisted, all of them on their feet for part of every day for the first time in years. In the very back stood Strauss, hands behind his back, his silver hair slightly less perfect than it used to be, his posture carrying something new, not the certainty of before, but something that looked, from a distance, more like humility. In the 3rd row sat Dr. Una Park, who had insisted to the neurology journal editors that the corresponding author on the paper was a floor nurse at Meridian Medical Center. Boyd spoke for 9 minutes. He talked about the chair. He talked about 17 years of telling his children to stop hoping. He talked about what it felt like to look down at your own leg and watch it move. He talked about the 3 veterans whose nodes had been too far gone, who had shaken his hand and said thank you for coming back for us, without bitterness, and meant it, and were gone. He did not cry. 40 years of speaking to formations had given him that much. At the end, he said one more thing. Several months ago, a woman in blue scrubs came into my exam room and crouched down and asked me a question that nobody in 17 years had thought to ask. She is not a general. She is not a doctor. She is a floor nurse at this hospital, and before that she was a warrant officer in a program that the Army decided wasn't worth the budget. I am standing at this podium because she kept a device in her locker for 7 years and waited. Her name is Margot Lane. I'd like her to come up here. The room turned. Margot was in the 2nd row, blue scrubs, compass rose pin, hands in her lap. She stood. She walked to the front. Her shoes were quiet. Boyd stepped from behind the podium. He walked to her, slow, deliberate, the cane keeping its own rhythm, and stopped in front of her. He brought his right hand to his temple. He saluted her. In the front 2 rows, 11 veterans rose. Each of them brought a hand up. They held it. Una Park stood. 3 physical therapists stood. 2 nurses from Margot's own floor stood in the back, the ones who had asked her that morning why she was wearing her good pins, and she had told them she didn't know yet. And Bennett Strauss, in the very back of the auditorium, raised his right hand in the careful, unpracticed approximation of a salute, and held it there with more sincerity than he had held anything in a very long time. Margot's throat closed. Her chin was level. Her eyes were level. She raised her right hand, the one with the scar along the forearm, and she returned the salute. She held it. Then she lowered it, and the room began to applaud, and it went on for a long time. Afterward, Boyd found her near the side door. The board wants to establish a clinical program, he said. Long-term lighthouse recipients, identification, rehabilitation, follow-up. They want you to direct it. Full clinical privileges, new title. I'll take the program, Margot said, but I want to keep my floor shifts, 2 days a week. Boyd looked at her. Why? Because the next one might not come through neurology. They might come through the ER. They might be in a room I happen to walk past, and if I'm sitting in an office, I won't see them. Boyd was quiet for a moment, then he nodded once. He extended his hand. She took it. His grip was firm, the grip of a man whose body was remembering day by day what it had once been able to do. Slate, he said. She looked at him. That was your call sign. It wasn't a question. Yes, sir, she said. It still fits. He let go of her hand, clean slate every time. She walked back into the auditorium. Carter was laughing at something across the room. Laurel stood holding a paper cup of coffee with both hands and watching her father with the expression of someone who has braced for a blow for 17 years and still hasn't fully processed that it isn't coming. Margot stopped at the edge of the room. She touched the compass rose pin above her name tag, once lightly, the way a person touches a thing that has kept them pointed in the right direction across a very long distance. Then she picked up her bag. She had a shift starting at 3. There was a new admit on the neurology floor. Progressive neuromuscular decline, origin undetermined, veteran, 9 years. The note was flagged for routine intake. Margot put her phone away. She walked down the hall toward the elevator. Thank you for being here tonight. If this story sat in your chest a little, if it did something to you, leave me a comment below. Tell me where you're listening from. Tell me if you know someone who served and was left waiting. These stories matter because the people in them matter, and I'm going to keep telling them as long as you're here to listen. I'll see you next time on Hidden Badges Stories.